That was the first thing she told herself as she stood in his apartment doorway, shoes still on, backpack digging into one shoulder. The rain outside had come down harder than expected, turning the streetlights into blurred halos and soaking her jacket through. Going home now would mean a long walk, a bus that might not come, and a quiet apartment that felt too big lately. Looks like the weather made the decision for you, he said, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The warmth hit her immediately, radiator humming, lights low, the faint smell of coffee that had been reheated one too many times. His place was small but tidy in a way that suggested effort, not obsession. Books stacked on the table. A jacket tossed over a chair. Lived in. I can still go, she said, even as she set her bag down. He shook his head. No pressure. Just, you don't have to. That phrase again. You don't have to. He'd been saying it a lot lately, like he was careful not to ask for anything at all. She wasn't sure if that made things easier or harder. They moved around each other awkwardly, both pretending this was normal. He offered a towel. She declined, then accepted. She stood near the window while he made tea, watching the rain slide down the glass in uneven lines. So, he said, handing her a mug. Rough day. She almost laughed. That's one way to put it. He didn't push for details. Just nodded, like he understood that some days came with too many explanations and not enough words. They sat today on opposite ends of the couch, steam rising between them, silence stretching but not snapping. She noticed things she hadn't before. The faint crease between his eyebrows when he was thinking. The way he tapped his thumb against the mug, then stopped when he realized he was doing it. He seemed more tired than usual, not exhausted, just worn down at the edges. You can take the bed, he said suddenly. I'll crash on the couch. Her head snapped up. No, I'm the guest. Doesn't matter. It does to me. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. This wasn't about furniture. It was about lines they'd been circling for weeks without naming. About how close was too close. About what happened when comfort started to blur into reliance. She looked away first. Let's not decide that yet. He accepted that, too. Of course he did. They talked a little, about nothing important. A class she hated. A show he'd started but never finished. The conversation drifted, slowed, until the rain softened and the clock crept closer to midnight. She stood and stretched, suddenly aware of how tired she was. I should probably figure out where I'm sleeping. He followed her gaze to the couch, then to the narrow hallway where his bedroom waited. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Whatever you're comfortable with, he said. That was the problem. She didn't know what that was anymore. She picked up the spare blanket from the chair and folded it over her arm, aiming for the couch. It felt like the sensible choice. The safe one. The one that kept everything uncomplicated. At least, that's what she told herself. But as she turned toward the couch, she felt his eyes on her back, and something in her chest tightened, not fear, not excitement, but the quiet weight of knowing this night mattered more than either of them wanted to admit. And that whatever choice she made next would change the shape of things, even if only a little. The apartment grew quieter as the night settled in. The rain had eased into a soft, steady tapping against the windows, the kind that made time feel slower, thicker. She sat today on the couch now, blanket folded beside her instead of over her shoulders, mug cooling on the table. He leaned against the counter across the room, arms crossed, pretending to read something on his phone that clearly wasn't holding his attention. Neither of them mentioned the sleeping arrangements again. Instead, he asked, do you want to watch something? Or would that just feel like we're avoiding the obvious? She considered that, then shrugged. Maybe a little of both. He smiled faintly and queued up a familiar show, something light, something they'd both seen before. The opening theme filled the room, easing the silence without demanding too much from it. He didn't sit too close, choosing the armchair instead of the couch. She noticed. She always noticed. For a while, they watched without really watching. Her thoughts kept drifting. Back to the day she'd had, forward to the night she was in the middle of, sideways to the space between them. She tucked one foot beneath her leg, then stilled when she realized she was fidgeting. You're quiet, he said, not looking at her. So are you. Fair. The episode ended. Neither of them reached for the remote. The screen dimmed, casting the room in softer light, shadows stretching along the walls. She cleared her throat. Can I ask you something? He turned then, giving her his full attention. Always. Why are you being so careful? The question landed between them, heavier than she'd intended. His expression shifted, not defensive, just thoughtful. He took a moment before answering. Because I don't want to mess this up, he said. Whatever this is. She absorbed that in silence. The honesty startled her more than any flirtation would have. You think it's that fragile? I think you are, he said gently. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. I don't want to be treated like something that might break. I know, he said. That's what I'm trying to figure out how not to do. They shared a small, uneasy laugh. The tension shifted, not gone, but reshaped into something more manageable. She stood, stretching again, and picked up the blanket at last. I'm going to set up the couch, she said, more decisively this time. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Okay. She spread the blanket out, arranging the pillows with more care than necessary. It felt good to do something concrete, something that didn't require talking or interpreting. When she straightened, she realized he was still watching her, concern flickering across his face. You don't have to prove anything, he said. I'm not, she replied. I just need space tonight. He nodded, accepting that boundary without argument. I'll grab you a glass of water. When he returned, their hands brushed as she took it. The contact was brief, accidental, and somehow louder than anything else that had happened all evening. She pulled her hand back, heart racing, annoyed at herself for reacting at all. Sorry, he said immediately. It's fine, she said, too quickly. They stood there, awkward again, both suddenly aware of how late it was. The clock read past 1. The rain outside had stopped completely. I'll be in the bedroom, he said. If you need anything. She nodded, then hesitated. Hey. He paused in the doorway. Yeah. Thank you, she said. For not making this weird. A small smile touched his mouth. I think it's already weird. But, we're handling it. After he disappeared down the hall, she sat on the couch and stared at the darkened screen. Her chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the effort of holding something back. Wanting closeness and choosing distance. Wanting safety and not knowing which choice gave her that. She lay down at last, blanket pulled up to her chin, listening to the unfamiliar quiet of someone else's space. The couch wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't restful either. The ceiling seemed too close, the air too still. She closed her eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. And knowing this wasn't finished yet. The couch was too short, the cushion dipping in the middle just enough to remind her she wasn't meant to stay here. She shifted once, then again, careful not to let the blanket slip. The apartment was dark now, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlight outside and the digital clock on the microwave blinking an unreadable hour. From the bedroom down the hall, there was no sound. That, somehow, was worse. She stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks, listening to the building settle. Every small noise felt amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of cooling pipes, the soft rush of a car passing outside. Her mind refused to quiet, replaying the night in fragments. The rain. The tea. The way he'd said always when she asked if she could ask him something. She rolled onto her side, facing the back of the couch. This was the right choice, she told herself. Clear boundaries. No confusion. No blurred lines in the dark. So why did it feel like she was the one holding her breath? Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time had started to stretch in that strange way it did when you were tired but wired, stuck between wanting rest and resisting it. Her phone buzzed faintly on the table, low battery warning. She ignored it. Eventually, she sat up. The blanket slid to her lap as she rubbed her face with both hands. Her shoulders ached, tension coiled tight between them. She hadn't realized how much she needed rest until it felt completely out of reach. She glanced down the hallway. The bedroom door was cracked open, spilling a thin line of light across the floor. He hadn't turned it off completely. The sight stirred something uncomfortable in her chest, not longing, exactly, but awareness. He was awake too. Or at least, he had been. She stood quietly, padding toward the kitchen for a glass of water. The floor creaked under her step, and she froze, listening. No movement. She exhaled and continued pouring water from the tap, the sound loud in the stillness. Can't sleep either. His voice came from behind her, gentle, careful not to startle her. She turned to find him leaning against the hallway wall, hair slightly rumpled, wearing an old t-shirt that looked too soft to be new. Not really, she admitted. Yeah, he said. I figured. They stood there, a few feet apart, both barefoot, both clearly tired. The kitchen light felt too bright suddenly, exposing more than either of them was ready for. The couch is not great, he said, not accusatory. Just factual. She shrugged. It's fine. He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. You don't look fine. She bristled instinctively, then sighed, some of the fight leaving her. I just don't want to make things complicated. I know, he said. But being uncomfortable doesn't make things simpler. The words landed softly but stuck. She wrapped her hands around the glass, grounding herself in the coolness. I don't want you to think. I don't, he interrupted gently. I promise. Silence settled again, different this time. Less awkward. More honest. He shifted his weight, clearly debating something. You're allowed to take up space, he said finally. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it makes things unclear. She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't pushing. Wasn't assuming. Just offering, the way he'd been all night. I don't want to cross a line, she said quietly. Then don't, he replied. We can draw one together. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. The hallway felt narrower, the distance between them more noticeable now that it had been named. She glanced back toward the couch, then toward the bedroom. The choice she'd been avoiding all night was still there, waiting. I just need sleep, she said. He nodded once. Me too. He stepped aside, giving her a clear path down the hall, but not moving toward her. Not deciding for her. She hesitated only a second longer. Then she picked up the blanket from the back of the couch and followed him. She paused at the edge of the bedroom, the blanket folded in her arms like a shield. The room was dim, lit only by the lamp on the nightstand turned low enough to soften everything it touched. The bed looked larger than it had earlier, less like a decision and more like a question. He stood near the dresser, giving her space, hands tucked into his pockets as if to remind himself to stay still. You don't have to, he said again, gently. The couch is still an option. She swallowed. I know. She crossed the room slowly and set the blanket down at the foot of the bed. For a moment, she just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the apartment, the muted sounds of the city outside. This felt different than she'd imagined, not charged, not dramatic. Just careful. She gestured vaguely. Where do you usually? Left side, he said quickly, then stopped himself. But I can switch. No, she said, surprising herself. It's fine. He nodded, relieved, and moved to the left, sitting on the edge of the mattress. She climbed onto the other side, keeping a deliberate distance between them. The bed dipped slightly under the combined weight, a reminder that this was shared now, even if everything else was separate. He reached over and turned the lamp off. Darkness settled around them, not total but close enough. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, every sense suddenly sharper. The sheets smelled clean. Familiar, but not hers. Hey, he said softly. Yeah, if at any point this feels wrong, you say the word. No explanations. I'll move. She turned her head slightly toward him, just enough to see the outline of his face. You don't think I'll change my mind? I think you're allowed to, he said. That's not a failure. That's just being human. Something in her chest loosened at that. She faced the ceiling again, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They lay there in silence, careful not to brush against each other. She pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, cocooning herself in it. Her thoughts raced at first, then gradually slowed. The bed was warm, more forgiving than the couch. Her body seemed to recognize rest as a possibility now. He shifted once, subtly, then stilled. Is this okay? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she said, equally quiet. Thank you for asking. Another pause. Then, I'm not trying to be distant, he added. I just don't want to assume. I know, she said. It actually helps. The darkness felt less heavy now. Safer. Minutes passed. Her breathing evened out, muscles unclenching one by one. She could hear his breaths too, steady, deliberate, like he was making sure not to rush anything, even sleep. I used to think space meant someone didn't care, she said suddenly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. He didn't react right away, didn't fill the silence. And now I'm not so sure, she admitted. He turned his head toward her, but didn't move closer. Space can mean respect, he said. Or patience. Sometimes it's the only way to make room for trust. She let that settle, surprised by how right it felt. Eventually, her eyelids grew heavy. The thoughts that had kept her awake on the couch drifted apart, losing the grip. She rolled slightly onto her side, facing away from him but no longer tense. Just before sleep claimed her, she felt the mattress shift again, him adjusting, careful to keep the invisible line intact. "Good night," he murmured. "Good night," she replied, already half asleep. They didn't cross the line. But in the quiet dark, with nothing demanded and nothing assumed, something else took shape instead, something steadier, built not on closeness alone, but on choice. And for the first time that night, she slept deeply.